that even at senior leadership level, there are very different opinions. And if people are going to be true to themselves and true to where they feel God is leading them, at some point they're going to have to say that. And you can't have a kind of cabinet. Everybody pretends they agree when they don't agree.
Sure.
That is ultimately unhealthy and dishonest. And I don't know any other way around it than saying that there are different opinions here. And the best we can do is to say we respect that people are obeying what they believe, where they believe God is leading them. We may think they are profoundly wrong, but
yeah, I hear you. I think it's going to a place where we're going into two different places. Like, and this is where I think you and I diverge a little bit. And you can correct me if you think I'm wrong here. Is like, I think that this to me is rooted in the Articles of Faith. Like we all, like I talked about, I signed that in 1994 when I was 14 years old, signed those Articles of War. And I'm okay with the fact that I have friends, loved ones, family members who have moved away from the Articles of Faith. Like maybe they don't affirm a certain doctrine and they're no longer in the Salvation Army. I think that's okay. Like it's a free country, free world. You can do what you want. But at some point, somebody has diverted from the teaching of Scripture as confirmed through 2,000 years of church history until just very recently, like this has been the church's teaching. And as we're making that move, so if somebody's in senior leadership and doesn't agree, well, I've said this to people. And I say it in all love. I'm not really trying to hurt anybody by saying it. So please excuse me if it comes across that way. But you're the one who's moved. And that's okay. But we can't be the same organization and still try and just say, well, it's okay to agree to disagree. I'm not saying that's exactly what you're saying, but I've heard people say that around the world.
Yeah, I think where I would disagree is, and I have no problem with the Articles of Faith of the Salvation Army, none at all. But I don't think it is it is a functional doctrine, set of doctrines for a mission movement that reflects very much its time. I don't see it as such being an all-encompassing body of doctrines as you would suggest. It says nothing about things that the rest of the church hold very dear. The importance of baptism or communion. So I think you can't to say that gives us all we need, and if we're true to that, we'll take your position, and if we're not true to that, you'll end up with guys like me. I do think that's a bit of sleight of hand. It is not that simple. In fact, the Articles of Doctrine says nothing about sexuality. I accept your thing about the nuptial metaphor, but it actually says, well, that's a later addition. The actual Articles of War and that statement of faith says nothing about that. Now, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying where it's at, and I think you're putting more weight on the Articles of War than they will actually carry.
Certainly, I'm putting emphasis on the Articles of Faith and the covenant, the Soldiers' Covenant, and I'm putting an emphasis on Scripture. And so, like, that's no doubt about it. So if I'm going to guilty as charged, that's me. And so, like, I think there's no way of understanding the words, I will uphold the sanctity of marriage and family life. You'd have to strip them of all of their meaning and reinterpret them to understand it, to affirm LGBTQ relationships.
Okay, So you're not referring to the Articles of War. You're referring to a later gloss.
The Soldiers' Covenant that I signed.
Okay, which is a little different from what I thought you were saying.
Okay, yeah. So I kind of put now again, I don't take this because I don't take truth from the Articles of Faith or my Soldiers' Covenant and say, okay, now everything comes to that. I feel like I've arrived at truth and I'm trying to get there. As you said, a journey of discerning the reality of Scripture, how God has spoken in time and space. And I believe that that's most clearly expressed through the authority of Scripture. And I think the Salvation Army does a great job in those Articles of Faith. I'm disappointed with our policies, but those statements I think represent, this is the only thing, Chick, I believe that unites us. Like, you've been around the Salvation Army world and the global church. I mean, there's all kinds of differences. I mean, I'm coming to Manchester in June, I'm hoping to have a meal with you and Margaret. And when I do, like, I'm going to learn all kinds of interesting things about Manchester United and how the church expresses itself and all kinds of interesting things. But there is something that unites every Salvation. There's 1 million plus of us, and that's the Soldiers' Covenant. So I guess, yeah, I am guilty as charged. That's what I hold.
Yeah.